delay this further and pass on the baton to Kusumika.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for giving me 1 hour and 15 minutes now straight of your Saturday morning. I understand it's a big deal. And, all the work from home models have now started saying that, so what if it's a Saturday? So what if it's a Sunday? Every day is Sunday. But honestly, I don't know about you guys, but my schedule is going crazy with work and it's work day every day. It sucks. But thank you anyway for being present here. Clearly, that means that you think it's important to talk about the topic that we are addressing today. And I'm very glad for that. Sauraveshwar sir did most of my introduction. So I wouldn't go into that any further. This little guy and I will be talking to you for this 1 hour. This is a discussion. So I will be laying down the foundation of what we're talking about for roughly half an hour to 40 minutes. After that, I will open the stage to everyone. Whatever questions you have, whatever concerns you have, please raise it. Let's have a discussion. While I'm speaking, if you want to raise a point, kindly type it in the chat box that you see, and I will be taking it up. All right. So on that note, let's start. I have been hosting this session on consent since last year, and my first trigger was when the Indian state actually absolved Jammu and Kashmir of its statehood, imposed an internet ban that is lasting till now, mind you, even though they tell you that no, this is off, this part is working, it's not. So, and it was done so suddenly. I remember I was sitting in a cafe writing a paper, and suddenly this news article flashes on my phone. And I have a lot of friends from there. I have a lot of friends who work there. And suddenly they were like off the face of earth, we don't know what is happening. You realize the importance of internet even more in something during the pandemic that we are facing now. I cannot see any one of you physically. Usually I'm accustomed to doing this like in a classroom setup, in an open stage where I'm looking at my audience, where I'm talking to them. Here I'm basically pinning my screen and looking at my own face and wondering how long haven't I done my eyebrows for. But the point is that when we are operating in a virtual world, right, we have to be prepared for the kind of challenges we might face. And although we have been exploring the internet since quite some time, a lot of us already worked from home before. This is not completely alien to us, but let's face it that it has been never to this magnitude before. And that has also brought about some very specific concerns. This particular session was a product of Sauraveshwar sir and I texting out of fury once we saw what is happening with the various social media pages being busted, coming out with their content, being absolutely shameless and defiant about it. Uh, I do not mince words, so I'm particularly talking about the boys' locker room. For everyone who's going to come at me with, oh, but the girl originated the text on Snapchat, that does not absolve anything of what conversations happened in that group. It is terrible that one girl felt that it's okay to talk about her own rape, to test a guy's character. This is exactly the patriarchy that we are trying to fight. It does not necessarily constitute of a guy or a girl or any other gender, to be specific. So this particular session is a product of that. And if you're here today, I hope you have a little bit of rage about that in you. If you don't, we are okay to talk about it. The point of having this session is to first of all orient ourselves on this new mode of operation that we have of life right now. We are working, we are talking to our friends, we are shifting our dating life, our stable relationships, our whatever we have, our connections with family, to this platform online. I didn't even know about the existence of Zoom before COVID-19, honestly. So good for Zoom people, but not so good for us if we are not equipped to battle the kind of issues that are going to come up. The boys' locker room incident is not specific to this pandemic, right? And neither is it specific to just one bunch of hormonal teenage boys. This is the scenery we have across the country, across generations, across our family WhatsApp groups, across our Instagram DMs where people slide in thinking how cool that is. The point of addressing all this today, first, we do a little bit of orientation on what is consent. As Indians, we live in a democracy, right? And to live in a democracy, to be good citizens in a democracy, we have to have a very sound knowledge of consent. And honestly, I shouldn't be doing this session with people who are our age. We should be doing these sessions with children as young as 5, 6 years old, 3, 4 years old, as early you can start, so that we don't build to this point, that we have to come up and sit down and actually explain consent to ourselves when we are 25, 26, 30 years old. That's sad. So from today, like, if you take away anything from this session, kindly share it. Go ahead, share it, ask me for the details if you want. Talk to the younger members in your family, talk to your teenage brothers, talk to your teenage sisters, talk to people younger than that, because this basic concept is very important to us. Why am I saying that again and again? Because the concept of consent is basically informed consent, right? What is consent? On that note, I'll be sharing a short presentation. I'll be coming back with the video. Then again, I'll be starting the presentation. So just bear with me for a second. Right. I hope everyone can see this. Can someone please enable the mic and tell me if this is visible?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is right there on your screen, that it's a process between two parties. By two parties, it can constitute of as many individuals, whatever situation, anything that you can think of. And it is specific to each activity. So technically, if you have a friend who goes out with you for tea every day, right? When you walk into your college classroom, you are still supposed to ask them every day, hey, do you want to go for tea? If they say yes, then they come along. But just because they go with you for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, doesn't mean you automatically assume that they will come with you on Friday, right? These basics, if we can incorporate into our lives, into our everyday lives, then we will perhaps have lesser of these conversations that we are having today. Consent can be given or retracted at any time. You're on Friday, when you ask your friend that, hey, do you want to go for tea? And they think for a while because they go every day, right? But they're not really feeling up for it. They can say no to you. And even after they say, okay, let's go, and you exit the classroom door and they say, you know what, you just go ahead and I'm not coming today, it is fully in their rights. Please don't throw a tantrum about, why are you not coming? And remember, this tea session is only metaphorical. I hope you understand that this applies to every sphere of life. Consent can only be given in a clear mindset. If you ask your very drunk friend to go for tea, it doesn't really count if you're asking them or not, right? If you're asking your friend who's asleep if they want tea and they are not responding, and if you just pour tea down their throat, that doesn't work either. Consent is ongoing. Every moment that that person is engaging in an exchange with you, an activity with you, they are giving you their consent, which can be pulled back. Like I said, it can be given at any time, it can be retracted at any time. Even if they sip on the first sip on that teacup and then they say, you know what, I don't want to drink anymore, it's up to them. You cannot force that tea down their throat just because they agreed in the beginning. Both partners in that activity need to feel safe and comfortable. I'm not only talking about sexual encounters, I'm talking about conversations, I'm talking about daily exchanges, I'm talking about you borrowing things from people, everything, right? Consent does not exist if pressure or coercion are used to gain it. This is the most important. You know what is informed? Consent. You know what is not informed? Violence. When somebody wants to punch you, they don't exactly ask you, hey, is it okay with you if I punch you? They just come and punch you, right? That's the whole point. So if you ever equate this point that, oh, but he just looks like he has a face that wants to be punched, that is a clear violation of consent. That also means you should not go assuming things about people's faces, dresses. Even if they're wearing a t-shirt saying punch me, ask them that, do you mean what is written on that t-shirt? Because sometimes we just wear t-shirts without seeing quotes. I hope you get my point. why we're talking about consent, gender justice, politics, internet, it's a lot of things that we're talking about, right? And I said that in order to be good citizens in a democracy, we need to have understanding of this concept. The basic understanding of consent is permission. Can I do this with you? Will you be interested to do this with me? Today, in order to participate in this, we reached out to you with our advertisement. You signed up. I told Sarveshwar sir that yes, I'm okay with conducting this. You are here now with your consent. I am talking to you with your consent, right? So this should be pivotal to every exchange in our lives. Like I said, informed. What is informed is consent. What is not informed is violence. What it is, it's a process. It's a constant exchange. It is not a one-time agreement. You don't just sign it like you buy a house, right? You have to obtain it at every stage. Why does understanding consent make you better citizen of a democracy, right? So before we move on to our laws, we will talk about exactly why it is important for us to understand the concept in order to be better at doing this democracy thing, which we're clearly failing at these days. What we have in India is a republic. Our constitution says Republic of India, right? What exactly is a republic? As you can see on your screen, the head of state is elected, so no king or queen business. The Indian Republic is a hard-earned product of conquests by a large number of people from different parts of the world. Colonization, we have our white-skinned masters to thank for. Struggle for independence, the whole development of this nationalism thing that we have in our mind. Partitions, because the Indian partition is not just what you see on the Pakistan-India border or Bangladesh-India border, because there were a number of partitions that shaped what we look at as the Indian map today. We separated from Myanmar, we separated from Sri Lanka, we separated from our neighbors of Nepal, Bhutan, all these things were carved out. So a number of partitions, right? And drafting the Indian constitution. This is perhaps the most important point of what we're discussing today. Our constitution, honestly, of course, a lot of parts have problems, but the reason why we have a constitution till now is because it is so adaptable, it is flexible. It has provisions for amendments, which is exactly being used right now to destroy its spirit. But then it's present. And it should be used to the best of our abilities. What sustains a republic? What sustains a democratic republic? Elections, right? Every 5 years we go on and we reassert our consent that, okay, this person can stay in office, or okay, now I want a new person. So do you see where the foundation of this concept is in our country, in the politics of our country? And do you see how important it is that you reiterate your consent? If it was not necessary, then you could have voted once and for all in 1947 and said that, okay, we are having this party in power and these people in power, and then be done with it, be gone. Why are we wasting so much money every 5 years to make sure that we still have the ongoing concept of consent? If it is that easy to understand, then why is it that difficult to implement in our personal exchanges, right? I will show my face again for a little bit, and then we will move on to the legal part of this. So up until now, if you have anything to say, please type it out. Otherwise, let's come back to the pandemic, right? Let's come back to the fact that we are all working from home. Our relationships are transforming. We are probably doing a lot of things virtually that we would otherwise be doing personally, seeing people, talking to them, touching them, going out, everything. That also means a renewed set of ethics in this sphere, that you are looking at your camera right now, looking at my face, looking at my screen, right? So all these have to have a fresh set of guidelines, which were not so clear up until now. We will address that in the legal part. Now, the whole point of holding this conversation is consent is not simply a factor of trust. The focus is on someone else earning that trust. The onus of trusting someone is not on you, right? When you share something with someone, it's given that you trust them. Otherwise, why would you? When you talk to someone, When I'm sitting here and talking to you, it's given that I trust you, that you're understanding what I'm saying, what language I'm speaking in, right? If I did not have the trust in you, why would I interact with you? So when questions come up on why did you share this, you know, why would you not take accountability for what you did? You don't have to, because if someone earned your trust and you shared something with them, it's the very basic ethic. And this is also a research ethic. Consent is a research ethic, that once you have obtained their consent, once they have obtained your consent, you can have an exchange. Of course, you can withdraw your consent at any point. Also, I said informed consent, remember? So if you're sharing something with someone, unless you're specifically writing that, okay, this is up for public consumption, or you're saying, okay, please go ahead and share this with your friends, or make a damn folder out of it on Google Drive, right? You haven't given them their consent. You haven't said that this is, you have my permission to use my thing. Why do we talk so much about plagiarism? What is plagiarism? In research, in any kind of creative property right, in any kind of intellectual property right, if you're using anything that belongs to someone else, you give credit. You say that, oh, this person said this and I'm borrowing from that, I'm developing on that. Oh, this person created this art. The poster that you saw for this event, the art is actually taken from an Indonesian artist called Eko Nugroho. His collection is brilliant. It's called Plastic Democracy. Please look it up. It's called giving credit and acknowledging that, oh, they have done it and not I, right? If that's a research ethic, then why wouldn't that be a conversation ethic? When you share something with a friend, when you share a personal detail, I'm not only talking about nudes, right? You're you're giving them a part of your mind. You're sharing information that is privy to you, and you're trusting them that they will keep it to themselves. So unless you have gone ahead and said, go ahead and tell the entire neighborhood about it, if they do it, it's punishable by law. At least it's punishable by law till you are being present on a virtual platform, till you are being governed by the set of laws laid down by the Indian Constitution. And mind you, we actually have laws protecting our anonymity, our privileges, our information, our data, our photos on the internet, right? So if you find someone lurking, if you find someone taking your photos and posting it, people create fake profiles, right? And people often steal your photos, siphon them off, post it on another profile. And what do? You say report. So when you say report, the social media platform that you're using reviews that, checks, and yeah, Digangana, I'll just read your message and get back to it, right? And then if they find it inappropriate, they take it down. Personally, I find a lot of problems with the standards that these social media platforms have, because pretty often when you report something, they don't take it down. Their community standards or something ridiculous like that. I can't figure out how that works. But then the concept exists, right? Uh, I will read out Digangana's comment for everyone. Everyone can see it in the chat box. When we talk about consent, there can be an 8-year-old child and a 16-year-old teenager. Teenager may ask the child before touching them. Exactly. She has raised a very important point, right? Which is the age of consent. So, especially when we are talking about sexual exchanges, especially when we're talking about physical contact, there is a minimum age of consent, right? Even if, like Digangana said, if the child is 8 years old and a teenager says, oh, shall I touch you there? Do you want to see how it feels? And the child says, okay, because they don't know better, right? And I don't know how many personal chords I'm touching with this, because we have, a lot of us unfortunately have had experiences of this kind. So in our law, there is a minimum age of consent. If you engage in any kind of sexual activity, physical touch with a person below that age, you are punishable, right? Thank you for raising that point. That is very important. If you want more information on this, if you want to find out what law this is, of course, you can Google or you can reach out to me. The presentation I have also has elements of that. You will see the age of consent part. So what are the pivotal parts that we're talking about? We're talking about informed consent. We are talking about the age of consent. We are talking about consent being a continuous process, right? Just because I agreed to talk to you today doesn't mean I am automatically agreeing to talk to you tomorrow. Just because I went out with you once doesn't mean I want to have sex with you. Just because I had sex with you once doesn't mean I want to keep on at it. It can be withdrawn at any point, right? Once we have shifted to this virtual paradigm during COVID-19 and our work has shifted, a lot of us are working from home. A lot of us have colleagues, and these regular weekly video calls, we have shifted to emails, we have shifted to WhatsApp chats more frequently than ever. Personally, I'm a very private person. I don't like sharing my personal information, even at workspace, so much. I use my work email for all this. But this pandemic has forced us to create like a WhatsApp group where we can continuously update each other, so on and so forth. And there are strict rules of how to operate in places like that. The workspace sexual harassment law that we have, Vishaka guidelines, right? I will get back to Shiny's comment as well. Vishaka guidelines actually apply to your online workspace as well. You will see this in the presentation again. Shiny is saying how consent works when there is the whole idea of being available in home and work, especially you are at home 24/7. Exactly. I have been working around the same boundaries. Just like I said, because our bosses have this lovely way of saying that, every day is Sunday now. So tomorrow I have a meeting at 11 a.m. and it's important. So I need to be there. But the fact that your workspace may feel entitled to you just because you are at home during this pandemic also means that they are not adhering to the work from home laws. At my organization, we specifically laid down rules that we'll be working from 10 to 2:30 every day, and any work beyond that time will have to be addressed specifically to us. Whether we attend to that or not is upon us. So if you're working from home and if your organization is not very set on these rules, you might have a conversation about this, that if the regular working hours are from 10 to 6 or whatever, then find out a new working hour and operate within that, because once you cross the boundary again, they are violating your consent, right? On the personal note, I would like to say that you can also just switch yourself off beyond your working hours, beyond what they have given you, and address it the next day. One perk of working from home is they can't really do anything about it, right? Okay, don't go and tell people that I said that. So Spandan is addressing something to us. I would like to ask about consent from a socio-psychological perspective. Any form of violence is a process of de-individuation, right? Which is utter dehumanizing of the other. It starts at the minute level. One of the primary causes is anonymity, like a man speaks the truth when given a mask. The idea of diffuse responsibility is also pivotal. The same is this scenario in boys' locker room. The idea of consent is something contractual which somewhere evades these microscopic psychological domains. How do you address that? That is a very nuanced question. Thank you for that. That actually allows me to talk about a lot of facets that we were planning to address in this. De-individuation, of course, right? But if we are specifically taking that boys' locker room incident and we are only discussing that, so which is utter dehumanization of the other, I agree with you. It is objectification, it is dehumanization, but it is also individually pointing out the victim, right? The photos which were being shared on that platform, they were not exactly maintaining the anonymity of the person whose photo that was, right? They were maintaining the anonymity of the person who's posting the photo or writing comments on that photo or talking vile about that photo. So they have violated her, and I'm saying her here because most of the photos posted in that group, I'm saying most because I haven't personally viewed the contents of that group, all of them, thank goodness for that. And there might be something else also, but her photo, the moment it is taken, posted without her consent somewhere, that is immediate violation and that is up for penalization, right? And I'm talking in very legal terms here because there is no other way of addressing this right now. You cannot go up to the person and confront them right now about this because of the pandemic that we are in. Wherever the victim lives, wherever the abuser lives, you cannot just cross the distance right now and go and confront them physically and do what you want to do, right? So even if you want to call the police, you will have to inform them about these cyber protection laws, about how your consent has been violated, about what exactly have they done. And I'm telling you this from personal experience. If you go to the police, please do a little bit of background check on the laws, on the sections of the Indian Penal Code before you do, because once you speak that language, they take you more seriously. If you'd like to press charges under these sections, it's going to help you when you talk to the police like that. Otherwise, it is really up to them based on which they register the complaint or not, right? You have talked about anonymity, that man speaks the truth when given a mask. This anonymity, again, I am only concerned about the virtual world right now, right? So virtual anonymity is not, fortunately, as concrete as physical anonymity. If a man touches you on a bus and gets down and you can't trace them again, which has happened to me multiple times, fortunately, the virtual world is a little easier to trace back because you leave all these footprints, right? And of course, the people who are more savvy are going to find a way to get around it. But there are also people who are more savvy and on the other side of finding these people. So diffuse responsibility is pivotal because it's a group, right? But when the whole group is enabling this kind of conversation, on a very personal account, a few days ago, I left a lot of groups, right? And it was very honestly, I think a lot of people think that I overreacted. Why did I do this? It was only a joke. We were just friends exchanging terms. But as long as you are sitting there enabling that kind of conversation, you'll always be a part of that. So when the charges are pressed, they will also be pressed on you. Unless you are leaving that group, unless you are connecting or correcting others who are present in that group, unless you are raising a voice, it's essentially implying that you also have a part in that. So be careful of what you're participating in. Be careful of where you're joining. Be mindful of what kind of conversations they're having, right? And please see to it that you do not unknowingly enable this kind of exchanges in your groups, in your peer circles, in your workspaces. Because what you're really doing is you're really making the world unsafe. And you also have people to value in the world who will be feeling unsafe as a ripple effect, right? The idea of consent is something contractual which somewhere evades these microscopic psychological domains. How do you address that? I agree that not everything is explicitly spoken, and this whole psychology of, oh, but these number of screenshots came up where these, especially in the Kolkata circle, right? A lot of people, a lot of girls were talking about their conversations with these certain guys and sharing screenshots of conversations. And if you go in the comment thread, you'll see that most of the people were like, oh, but she was encouraging him, right? She was not saying no. She was saying, okay, stop talking about this. She didn't immediately thrash him. So you have to understand that there are layers of the ways you can cause discomfort to a person. And they are not obliged to give you any particular reaction to tell you that, oh, you're violating my line. Them simply saying no, and them simply not, actually not even saying no, them simply saying that I don't know, right? Them not giving you a concrete yes. Anything less than a concrete yes is violation of consent. And trust me, it's not just me. That's how the Indian Penal Code believes it. So if you are going to assume someone's consent, I will implore that kindly check what laws we have on that and what that can cost you, right? On that note, I will be moving to a discussion on our constitution, the laws we have, because I really want everyone to be aware of where you can find things to redress if this happens to you or someone that you know of. Everything is, of course, available online. Everything is available with me. You can talk to your friends who are legal experts, but there are a number of ways to remedy this. I will be sharing my screen again and going back to the presentation. Right. Once more, will someone please enable the mic and tell me that this is showing?
It is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you so much. Right. So in this law section, we're actually talking about, I can see one more message, I think, but I will get back to that a little later. We are talking about the kind of consent that we understand outside a virtual world, And two, how much of that stretches into this virtual world, and what is exactly protecting you, your rights, your content, when you're operating over the internet through this pandemic as Indian citizens, right? There are, of course, global protection regimes, and that is another sphere of exploration. So first of all, what does it say about physical consent? This is up on everyone's screen. You can read for yourselves. But Section 375 of the IPC defines consent as an unequivocal voluntary agreement. Every word is key. When the woman, again, this is a big drawback of the Indian law against rape, against sexual offenses, because it does not cover men. It does not cover any other gender. And that, again, if you meet I don't know what they call them these days, but my annoying friends, ex-friends, or some of them call it men's rights activists. I'm not sure what that is. It's like White Lives Matter. But when you're talking about this kind of law, it should be literally protecting every citizen, right? And not just a woman. But unfortunately, this is how this is coded. And mind you, this is also a battle of feminism to get this to be gender inclusive. So in the IPC, it says when the woman by words, gestures, or any form of verbal or non-verbal communication communicates willingness to participate in the specific sexual act. Do you see this, that they are talking about saying yes and not saying no, right? So do you remember Kobe Bryant's death a couple of days ago? May he rest in peace. But that also brought forth the kind of problems he had in himself, right? Which also involves a very gruesome rape. And in that, if you read his accounts, it's all over the internet. I have the links with me if anyone's willing to read. He actually said, she explicitly didn't say no. And then the woman was like, I kept saying no. And he said, I usually have very rough sexual encounters where no is a form of like going about it. So I didn't think her no is a no. Do you see the problem in that kind of act? Fortunately, the Indian law sees that. So meek, weak, any kind of no means no. If it's a confusion, if it's I don't know, it's no. Anything but a hell yes is no, right? Section 354 of the IPC, again, this is woman. Actually, the only way a man can approach the Indian penal system for redressal of sexual grievances is under the same act that also criminalizes homosexuality. We are that messed up. There has been developments on that, of course, but that is up for a different discussion. The 354 says assault or criminal force on woman with intent to outrage her modesty. So intending to outrage, knowing it. And again, do you see that it is assumed that it will be a he and the victim will be a woman? Please note the problems in your head. And if you are noting the problems, please know that you are agreeing with the feminist discourse. Okay? Shall be punished with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 2 years or fine or with both. This is before rape. This is 375. This is the rape law. This again has a lot of problems because it talks about penetration as the only form of rape, right? So the details are up on your screen, and I have put up all the details so that we get over this habit of closing our eyes and saying that this is unpleasant to read, so we won't. This is what exists in your constitution. This is what protects you if you're a woman. A tiny part of this will protect you if you're a man. Hopefully we'll be able to change that in a while. If you see the last point, it's under the circumstances falling under any of the following 7 descriptions. These 7 descriptions are: 1, against her will; 2, without her consent. These 2 are very important points to note because will and consent are 2 different concepts, right? We will get to that. Thirdly, with her consent, when her consent has been obtained by putting her or any person in whom she is interested in fear. So this is coercion, threat, right? Fourthly, with her consent, when the man knows he is not her husband and that her consent is given because she believes him to be someone else. So this is again a very, social assumption of the woman only thinking that, she can only have sex with her husband, lawfully married and all. But then this is deception. If the woman believes that she is married to you, or if you know that you are not her husband and if you still do it, it will be considered rape, right? 5, unsoundness of mind, or if you are drugged, if you are drunken, this will again be rape, even if the woman says yes. Please understand that. 6thly, with or without her consent when she is under 16 years of age. This is the age of consent that Digangana was mentioning. So important. 7thly, when she is unable to communicate consent. You cannot tie a person up and then say, oh, but I think she's mumbled something which said a yes. Okay. And also, if she's unconscious, you don't force that tea down her throat. 3 major reforms in the law. POSCO, very important because POSCO is gender neutral, right? So this means we are actually making strides in our understanding of what constitutes sexual offense, what constitutes consent. Before this, child marriage is invariably rape with the age of consent. Otherwise, it's not, because technically, in the Indian marriage concept, you are entitled to have sex with your wife, right? I will just address the chat once. Okay, I can't get there, so I need to finish this. Just give me 2 minutes. Criminal Law Amendment Act, rape under 375 earlier included just vaginal penetration. The ambit of rape was extended. And this is important for us to know because these are the kind of growths that we have been experiencing in our society, right? And the Criminal Law Amendment Ordinance, these were the changes in the sexual intercourse laws. Like I said, will and consent are 2 different concepts, right? In the Indian context, both are used interchangeably, but there is a tremendous difference. Will is a mere want or desire to do an act. It usually reflects a yearning or longing to enter into a sexual act, right? I want to. But consent is actively going to the person and saying that, yes, I want to do it with you, let's do it, right? Will is in your head. Consent should be articulated. And until you have that, will is just not enough. A person can have a will to do a particular act, but still may not consent to it. Even if a person has a will to engage in a sexual activity, but actively no consent, would be liable for a crime, right? This is important to understand for us. When is it not consensual? Never to be shown by the way of gestures or looks. So even if it's your partner, make sure you are obtaining that consent explicitly every time. You may ask that, what is left of romance if you cannot directly go up and do something? And movies like Kabir Singh fueling a lot of our generations, but please do not take a gesture or a look as a final confirmation. Ask the most romantic way possible, right? Any sexual act without the consent of a person, or even with the consent of a person considered incapable under law, age, unconscious, unsound mind, if you're coercing them, all of those 7 factors, right, is considered a sexual offense. Exercise your right to information everywhere. If you're not sure of their consent, please ask, right? Make sure you ask every single time. And sexual harassment at the workplace, which is again the highlight of our discussion today, it is prohibited by the Visakha guidelines, and we are actually stretching that into the online sphere as well. What do the Visakha guidelines exactly prohibit? Unwelcome sexually determined behavior, whether directly or by implication. Again, very important, right? Physical contact and advances, demand or request for sexual favors, sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. I understand that a lot of people will come and say that, these laws are being misused. And that is really an argument that I'll not get into, because if you are coming and arguing about not even 2% of the population that this is covering misusing the law versus such a large number of people engaging with the violation of the law, then I believe your parameters are not working right of what should be its place and what should not be, right? If you're uncomfortable with a gesture, if a man at your workplace calls you, oh, you're looking gorgeous today, and you find there is something offensive with that, you have every right, okay, to call it offensive. You don't have to be like, oh, but she didn't take offense when he said that, but she took offense when I said that. That is really up to you, whatever makes you feel uncomfortable. The whole idea is to make it a safe space. This webinar that we're having today is a safe space. If someone comes at you for saying something that you are trying to communicate, that will not be tolerated, right? The whole idea is to make that workspace that same safe space. COVID-19 and work from home. Online harassment also encompasses sexual harassment, which is again the same act, right? So everything that you saw previously also stretches to the internet now. If your colleague, if your boss, if your work friend, someone, anyone is even sending you inappropriate jokes, this is covered, right? Please be aware, please exercise your right. What are the punishments exactly, right? Because this, again, I am talking in very punitive, retributive justice kind of language, because currently that is what we are understanding. The whole point of having this discussion is that we build a platform of consent in all of our minds, and that we don't need to talk about punitive action so much because we don't go down this way. But if we do go down this way, then there are these things to conquer it. Everyone can go through this on their screen. Please see that monitors the use by the first point, right? Whoever follows a person and contacts, this is online harassment, this is stalking, right? Stalking is actually punishable. If you are being made uncomfortable by someone repeatedly stalking you, you can actually take it up with law. You can have them punished, right? And why am I writing all these sections here? Like I said, if you're trying to register a complaint, it's easier if you know what that falls under. So all these things are saying that you will be punished with 3 years of imprisonment, fine, you'll be offenses under this section comes to this. Please see the second last point. If someone is constantly bugging you with derogatory verbal abuse because of your gender, a lot of people, right, especially at the moment, the content creators on Instagram, on Facebook, and people are regularly charging you with hate comments. People are regularly, if it is of a specific nature, right? If there are rape threats in your comments, please go ahead and report them. Go ahead and report them and see how many people, if they run, they will probably run out of jail space actually. But go ahead and report them so that we can reduce this a little bit. Because honestly, you can ignore hate comments, but do not ignore rape threats, violence threats, because there are literally provisions to remedy that, right? If anyone wants another look at this, please get back to me. I will send it to you personally. Moving on. Voyeurism is also criminalized even under online existence, right? So if right now I'm speaking and you are taking a picture of me, or if you're zooming in and taking a picture of something, you better believe I'll come after you as whoever you are, right? So the whole point is that was an empty threat, but the whole point is that if you are engaging with behavior like that, if someone is on, say, a video call with you, you take a picture and you use to circulate it, please know that you will be punished, right? And 7 years of imprisonment is not really fun. Punishes criminal intimidation as threats made to anyone. So again, this whole boys locker room episode where, you know, they were threatening that, oh, how dare you leak this, I saw those screenshots, that also is punishable, by the way. Derogatory verbal abuse punishes criminal intimidation by anonymous communication, which also means that if someone is texting you from a fake account and all that, it can be traced back. Like I said, people leave footprints online, right? So these are all punishable stuff. We'll get back to our video and I'll take all the questions that you have. Right. I wasn't being able to see this before, but now I am. Spandan. Digangana is talking about marital rape, of course. Let's take this point by point, right? Marital rape, by its very terminology, is an oxymoron in the Indian context, in the eyes of Indian law, because technically marriage is like a one-time contract where you declare null and void all sorts of this whole discussion we've been having about consent being ongoing, consent being retracted at any point. Because, you know, we have this really big public-private divide in patriarchy, and marriage is considered private, except dowry, which is very public because the society earns money from it. But marital rape, essentially, you really cannot, file a complaint against marital rape. You have to put it under one of those sections of rape. And if it is done by your husband, where you are saying that, oh, he did not have my consent, you actually can't do anything about it. And there is a whole battle that's going on with it. But for the timing, if you have to address marital rape, this is just to say what to do about it. You can lodge a complaint against that unlawful sexual activities. So the same act which criminalizes homosexuality, you can put it under that, but it has to be non-vaginal penetration. This is like crazy, but that's how it works, right? So if you actually want to complain about that, take that route and it will work. mm, Spandan is talking. He's saying de-individuation occurs from lynching to rape. I believe laws will not curb down anything. True that. The countries which have strictest policies see serious violation. Anonymity is very interesting. Perverse Gage, it is that subtle. Your comments are very nice, thank you. Gage, however, doesn't require consent, which is very intriguing. Benevolent sexism and violation of the body. Thank you, Spandan. That actually addresses a lot of my concerns. No, I do not believe that teaching laws will curb down this behavior. I believe that communicating laws will actually help you redress if this is already happening to you. What will curb down this behavior is sessions like these held, like I said, at the school level regularly, inculcated in the curriculum, made to communicate with peer groups among children, to be communicated to your children as young as 1 year old, who you just make understand that no one can take your sippy cup without asking you, right? No one can kiss your cheek without telling you. If you give your children the right to hug you and to deny your hug based on whether they want to do it or not, you are teaching them consent from a very foundational age. I believe that is what is going to change it. But I also believe that where we are right now, we need to be informed about laws. I'm not saying that the Indian laws have to be stricter, I guess, for the time being. What I'm saying is that there exist laws which will remedy situations, at least to some point, because registering a complaint with the police is an official pain, and I've gone through that. But these exist and you can actually take it up legally, right? What will stop this from happening is orienting our people from a very young age so that they do not become teenagers who indulge in activities like this, right? I hope that answers your question. I hope you go out and talk to someone about this. I hope you communicate this to your own family. It is really the family which is most often the site of breeding all our messed up ideologies as well as the best ones, right? So we can start by addressing the messed up ones. Namrata is asking, what about class privilege and misuse of laws to get bail and how money buys freedom? A lot of you will cut me on this, but honestly, I'm a little skeptical of the whole narrative that is being spun out of the boys' locker room thing now. Because, like we know, money negotiates everything, especially in this country. And yes, laws are negotiated every day with money. It happens. And no, Namrata, there is no other remedy to, I don't know, that can curb money probably, because you cannot inculcate these values unless you do it from the start. So right now what I'm saying is a very redressal kind of mechanism. Remember our classes in packs, and Namrata and I are both from peace and conflict studies, different batches, but we had all these classes on restitution, retributive justice, and then reconciliatory justice. We are only talking about retributive justice right now because we are at that stage. We need to start thinking about reconciliatory justice from now so that our next generation is less perverted than this. And I'm so sorry to be using that terminology, but these children are going to grow up. And if we do not communicate this to them effectively, then we are looking at this workshop continuing for ages, just a bunch of us biting people's ears off and nothing really changing, right? Digangana is saying, what if the survivor is threatened by the abuser? Complaint mechanism isn't protected. Yes, again, that is punishable by law. That is one of the tenets that I was talking about, that coercion or threats. This is also punishable. But haven't we all been following the cases in this country? And we know what happens, right? What exactly happens. This is exactly following from where Namrata is speaking. That is the social reality. And social reality will not be changed by laws. Social reality will be changed when we address mindsets, when we make sex education mandatory in schools, when we make consent not just about sex but about our everyday interactions. Even, see, we are taught consent in implicit ways in a lot of ways, but that is more of authority than consent. If we have to go to the toilet in school, we have to raise our hand and ask, ma'am, may I go to the toilet? Sir, may I drink water? Right? Technically, you are taking their permission because you are in their classroom and you are respecting their space. But it is never really effectively communicated to us that you're doing this because you're respecting their consent. What is communicated to us is, oh, that's your teacher, you're supposed to respect them, that's why you're doing this. So what we're taught is and submission to authority and not consent. So if we start teaching our children that, what exactly is the reason why they are made to do what they do, we will see changes. Otherwise, just making the legal system strong is not going to do much for us. Like I said before, again, this is only to address what situation we are in right now. COVID-19 and pandemic, how it is protecting, how you are protected in your online workspace, what rights do you have when someone stalks you, what rights do you have when someone harasses you online. And this is a very rights-based language, a retributive justice-based language. This is not sufficient, right? But this is what we have at the moment. And if you ask me how to make this better, like I said, we have to start talking at a very young age. We have to. Sarveshwar sir, last day when we were planning this session, he was like, we need to talk at the school level. This should be made mandatory to everyone. Children starting from class 1 should be made to understand the concept of consent so that they don't grow up to be teenagers with these problems, so that they don't grow up to be uncles in WhatsApp groups who are day in, day out sharing jokes on how miserable their life is, how pathetic their wife is, and then something sexist, right? These have to be the social maneuver. What we're talking about is right now the legal part. So if you pick up anything from this, please go out and have this conversation as much as you can in your peer groups. Call out people who are making derogatory remarks, even if it is not on you, even if it is on someone you don't care about, right? Just as Spandan was saying, de-individuation, you are not even respecting someone's individuality, someone's identity when you're derogating them in their absence. And there is always a certain color to that. If that is sexual in nature, please call people out in your peer groups, in your classrooms, in your workspaces. Do it, because there is no other way to change what mindset we currently have in space, right? Does anyone have anything else to say? You can also enable your video, you can enable your mic, you can talk to everyone, talk to me. I'm very happy to see the kind of engagement we are having. If you don't want to type, you can just enable your mic, right?
Hi, Kusumika.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So at the start of your discussion, you had referred to a connection between consent and research. You mentioned about that the ethics of research is so close to consent, right? And everything is definitely under a legal framework, even when one is in academia and they're pursuing. I presume a lot of the participants today might be in that brink of their career, either studying or pursuing, or even if they're working, a lot of them might be looking ahead to get into research or similar paths. Even I think in the professional space, when someone is working on a business model and there is like, as we speak about data privacy, data theft, information which is taken without someone's know-how, how important, or how does one understand this ethics part better? If you can just, if possible, highlight.
Sure. So I'm a researcher by profession, right? And I have been working on a couple of projects. I've been working with a couple of organizations. I've written a few theses. The thing with consent in research is, if you are in social science, you are operating with human beings, right? Your subjects are society, your subjects are politics, history, everything has a human character. You're not operating with inanimate objects, you're not operating with plants. And as soon as you factor in human beings, if you don't want to be caught in Spandan's bad gaze, then you better respect their individuality. By individuality, I mean their authority, their self autonomy, right? Their right to make choices. Small example, I have done a bunch of interviews for these research projects. Namrata, if she wants to talk about it, she will also tell you we were working on the same project one after the other. And we had to go and interview a lot of people, right? You know, the first thing we do while we interview people, we knock on the door, we say, do you have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, right? If so, consent starts from that very basic, right? If they say yes, you give the information of your research, informed consent, remember, and then ask, will you be interested to participate in this? If they say yes, you start. Before that, you explain every single criteria of the research, like there will be anonymity, or your name will not be revealed. Okay, you can withdraw your consent. You can withdraw your consent at any point of time. At any point in the research, if you're uncomfortable, you can tell me to stop it, right? The interview. You can ask me to walk out. Everything. You give your respondents that 100% right. And in the same time, you also retain that right for yourself. Personally, once I was in an interview, and the person who I was interviewing was making me really uncomfortable, right? He was making very disturbing comments for questions that were not at all related to that kind of content. And I kept up with it for 2 questions. I was trying to figure out what he's saying exactly, but with time, I have learned not to ignore that vibe in my head. So, just for the second question, I said that is enough information and I don't need to interview you anymore. And I closed it and I got away. Right? So, as a researcher, as a professional of any kind, you also exercise the same right to consent that you extend to others, right? Namrata is again asking question how to teach and let the understanding of consent reach lower or poorer sections of the society. First of all, like I said, make it mandatory in the curriculum of every single school, government, right? Every single board, every single college. Education should have consent and sex education embedded in it. Even if sex education comes after a certain age, in Indian schools, they teach what from class 8, 7, 8, a little bit of biology, not even sex education. No one calls it sex education, right? It The concept of consent really has to form a part of all these like all these courses that we have in schools. We have classes called value education, and what exactly do you teach there, right? Why not use those classes to communicate these concepts at a very pivotal level where you just enable them to understand consent in a conversation? uh, I will play, actually I can link that video here if you're interested in watching. There is a short video called Consent and Tea, right? It's a very big favorite of mine. Actually, I'll just play it for everyone. Is everyone up for it? If anyone has an objection, please type it. It's a 2 or 3 minute video, but it can actually communicate a lot of things, right? So just give me a while. I'll find it on YouTube. You reach sections of the society, whether it's children, whether it's people who do not share the same educational levels as you, with not with jargon, not with words like, oh, but you need to respect my individual choice, because there is a very big chance that they will not exactly get that you're talking about. So the key is, this is again a very important point of research. A person who's completely new to your kind of work should be able to understand what you're doing by reading it, right? It's not just people from social science should understand and no one else, but everyone who's reading your thing should be able to understand what you're talking about. Just give me a sec. I am gonna share my screen. I hope that
if you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay?
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Did no one get the audio on that?
If you're still struggling with whether I'm a slut, just imagine instead of initiating sex,
Just
you're
a
making me a cup
second.
of tea. You say, hey.
Okay. No one got the audio on that. I'm so sorry. Do you want me to play that again? Can someone tell me?
I guess we got a hang of the communication, even
Right.
without the audio. Yeah, I think we you can always share the link for us to.
Right. I will just link it here,
Yeah,
or I will
chat
send the
window.
link.
Yeah, maybe.
Sure, sure. So sorry about that. I didn't think that muting my mic would do this. Like I said, I didn't know about Zoom before COVID-19 started. But what that video is trying to say, in a very fun, light-hearted manner, is that if you wouldn't force tea on people, why do you force sex? Or why, for that matter, why would you force anything, right? If they are actively saying no, then if you ignore it and go on, of course you're a criminal. But even if they are not actively saying no, unless they are actively saying yes, anything less than that is non-consensual. Whether it is sex, whether it is internet engagement, whether it is exchanging pictures, whether it is sharing their pictures, this is the most important part, sharing their audio, sharing their anything. And honestly, if you tell me now that the whole boys locker room thing came about because someone shared a screenshot, then that is called reporting a crime, right? That is not called violating your consent. You shouldn't be doing things like that in the first place. And if you do, then you can't really ask for the protection of consent to protect your crime. That is messed up. So on that note, do we have anything from anyone? Right, Namrata. Right. So Namrata is asking a very important question about confusion, right? And she's saying that, suppose just for one example, you bring your friend home, you're brewing them tea, and or not even brewing them, you're just asking, do you want tea? And they're like, I'm not sure. And you are suddenly in a place where you're like, okay, what to do? And like Namrata asked, it feels confusing, right? Shut off the confusion. If they say they don't know, just go with the no. Don't make tea. If they want tea, they will come to you and they will say, please make me a cup of tea. If they do that, please make them one. If they don't drink that, please leave them alone, right? At any point where you do not have an explicit yes, just try to go with a no. And maybe that will save us from a lot of trouble and confusion in our heads, right? Do we have anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Can you please say your name?
My name is Pratiksha. Actually, like I just saw this recently in the lockdown only. As
Right.
we can see that during the lockdown, the social media usage has increased, right?
Right.
And the potential threat and harm comments on the post, whether it is
Mm.
public or private, it has increased.
Mm.
But when we report it, like suppose on Instagram, because I am currently active on Instagram only, so I can state about that only. We
Mm.
get the reply that we can't prioritize all the reports, and they ask us to either block that person or simply mute the comments or anything that we should do on our end. But nothing is reported.
Exactly.
So it is actually increasing the potential that the person who is writing those comments, he is unaware that someone is actually affected by it or not. He is just he or she, I mean, not just he or any other gender also, that
Right.
they are actually increasing the harm in the society. So what should we do about that? Because during the lockdown, there is no help outside available also as such.
Right.
So what should we
Right.
do about this?
Right. Thank you for asking that, because like we were saying in the beginning, that even if you report a post a lot of times, what happens is they will just say, this is not violating our community standards, or your report will be reviewed in due time, and then nothing happens. So what that does is shift the onus from the person who is inflicting the harm to the person who's being harmed. Just like our legal system shifts the onus to the victim, like you have to report it, you have to come out and report what has been done to you, you have to repeat it in front of several authorities at the cost of your mental health implications, at the cost of reliving that trauma. And that is because these community guidelines that they have are essentially flawed, right? So if we are planning to address that, then first of all, of course, there is a way to agitate, right? We can always write a petition, we can always draw some more attention on this, that with renewed focus on the internet, with ever more presence on social media, you also need to tweak your safety measures. And that does not mean simply putting on logos of stay home or social distancing everywhere. That also means that you secure your community through more stringent things. So what we can do about it is essentially, like I said, we can start a petition, we can start it from this very group, we can sign it, we can circulate it. We have to basically do it the pressure way, because these organizations will honestly not do anything that will harm their advertisement base, right? So even if you're reporting a person, it is only a couple of times, maybe once or twice, that I have seen them take action. Otherwise, they are always asking me to block them, as if the person is not malicious. It is just that they are malicious to me. So I think that approach is problematic. Thank you for pointing that out.
Hi.
If,
Uh,
yeah, please. Just
so,
say your name
so
before you.
yeah. So I'm Namrata. So
Right.
talking about the social media, Instagram thing. So recently, it's been going on, but recently during this lockdown, I was doing some research and I found out that people who post supposedly a photographer or a model, if she, you must be knowing about Saloni Chopra, how
Right.
she puts up sort of revealing pictures. So
Right.
there was a whole thing that if you put revealing pictures, I'm just talking about Instagram right now, if you put revealing pictures, you're saying yes. And if you're putting revealing pictures of yourself or with your partner, then so you're saying yes to everything. But even with yours, just your own self, or if a photographer is putting up things that she has worked on, which is sort of revealing in that sense,
Right.
it's saying yes. So,
Right.
and then how do you deal with that? Like because then I don't know what to understand, make sense of that.
Personally, and I might have anger issues, but this makes me want to throw furniture at people. But for the sake of more civilized exchanges, when someone tells you something like that, please explain the concept of consent, and please say that unless I have gone ahead and told you yes, right? Unless I have written those words and put an exclamation mark at the end of it, unless I have said that in any language, it's not a yes. Okay. If it is my account, I am literally entitled to put up anything that I want. If that offends you, you have the Instagram mechanism of going, reporting, whatever, which we do all the time, right? But unless you do that, you do not really have the authority to come up and tell me that what I am posting on my account of my own body. Again, if you are posting someone else's content, right? If you're a photographer and you're posting a model's content without their permission, problem. But if you are posting your own content, and even if you're not wearing anything but your birthday suit, it's not a yes to anything but the fact that you can look at my picture. You can look at my picture. If my profile is private, then you can look at my picture. Those of who you are my followers. If you're not, then you may not. Okay. So next time someone addresses you with a question like that, just be like, just because you are wearing red and I think red is a stupid color, do I go up and punch you? Because it is, that logic is that insane, right? Like I said, it makes me want to throw furniture at people. But yeah, I hope that answers your concern. The idea of a pressure group is actually quite nice. The talk we are hosting today is on behalf of India Fights Corona. We actually are doing a lot of activities. So if we have a body where we are taking up concerns and, you know, pressurizing these social media giants or whoever, whichever platform that we are working on, because we already have a lot of people working with us, we can have at least a little bit of traffic generated around that conversation, even if nothing more. But that is definitely a very good idea. Yes, I'd be interested. Do we have anything else? You can just unmute yourself and talk. You don't have to type at this point. Otherwise, I will request Saurabhishwar sir to help us conclude the session.
So I was actually so intently listening and also watching. Thank you, Kusumika, for the discussion. I remember we have done this session earlier, but and I felt that after the previous session, we knew a lot. But I think this is an evolving space, and we should definitely require more hands and legs and minds to be involved, in a sustained manner that we'll definitely work out. I think the pressure group concept is really exciting in terms of tangible work that can be done. Even when, you know, in this platform like today, 20 or 22 of us got together in a Zoom meeting room, and we also interestingly have gone Facebook Live with the session, and and people are responding. Like I must tell you that this is so relevant, and since we have people from backgrounds that is commensurate to the type of work required in the space.
Right.
Let's not just call it social science, but like human services, even like someone from a technology background, but very keen to, you know, work actively in that space. I think we can definitely tap them in. And Kusumika, we would love to see that, you know, if there can be a scope eventually, that the time that you provided us with the understanding, if we can do that in a more concrete, systematic manner, maybe a little course, maybe a training. On that note, I would like to inform the participants that last year we had run a course steered by Kusumika on a certified short training program on research in social sciences, which actually turned out to be very interesting in terms of the way it culminated finally. I remember that the students actually went public and presented their findings on the issues based on very proper format of learning the ethics of research. And since our discussion today started around that format, we will definitely love to see a scope. Exactly, we would love to see the scope that, you know, we can formulate a mechanism eventually And I think, yes, Kusumika, if you have any points on that note to talk about.
Sure. Last year we were doing, actually that was an experiment from us, because not a lot of people are really oriented to research at least their undergraduate level. I know I wasn't. Um, my department at St. Xavier's College had just introduced dissertation in our year, and we were like so lost for this. I only learned about it once I went for my master's, and then I decided to keep it. But then, research is not something that you just take up as an academic skill. It is also something that you use daily in your life. When you find a topic and you don't know about it and you go about it and read it, that is research. All we teach you is how to train your mind in a systematic way, ask questions in a systematic way, so that you can actually find answers that matter, right? So that certificate course was a lot of fun for me as well. And for the participants, as far as I've heard, they went on to write, we were two groups actually. They collected data, they went on to produce two papers. They presented those at a very nice, sir, what was the name of the meeting?
Yeah, that was the Y East platform.
Right, right.
People who are from Calcutta might be aware of TopCat CCU, where they had this public forum with stakeholders from different backgrounds, different walks of life, but really not familiar to each other, coming and consuming what was presented by your students. And I clearly remember, we didn't want to stop because people were like criticizing, and we were trying to defend. We were trying to support our findings, and we had actually some very interesting collaborations created through that meeting. And I think that's exactly what we would love to see the scope. If we can formulate another rerun of the course aligned to what all we discussed today and henceforth.
Exactly. We actually have a lot of topics coming up because of the pandemic, because of the new formats of life that we are adapting. And this time I was thinking we could also look into how working from home is actually having an impact on women or on non-male genders. And if that actually means more productivity or people having more access to a career or not. And of course, we are open for exploration and we have other ideas. But if you would want to join us, Swapna is here, right? Hi. If you want to join us, then please, you have our email, you have our website. Saurav Vishwa sir will give you our contact. In a few days, we will write out the advertisement for the certificate course of research in social sciences, right? That's what
Yes,
CPRS
absolutely.
stands for.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think we have the
So we'll
details
do
of all of you. So we'll definitely follow up with this. We are on, like, this is just not one session and we are forgetting each other. Rahul, do you have any question? Okay, I think that was just the mic, I believe. Yeah, right.
That's okay. All right, then I've taken up more than enough of everyone's time.
No, thank you so much. When one forgets the time, it means we are heading in the right direction. And thanks a lot, participants, for also taking out your time and participating in the session. We would love to take your feedback also after the session. Do reach out to us, what you liked, what you wanted to know more. Ideas are most welcome. We are like the black box, always absorbing ideas and trying to create it into more workable formats. Kusumika, can't thank you enough. This has been a pleasure, and yes, I think
yeah, everyone, thank you for chipping in and actually talking, because this is the first time where I'm not looking at anyone and just seeing my face and the bird behind me and talking. But thank you so much for participating. This means a lot. We will absolutely follow up with this. Have a great weekend. Thank you, sir, for
thank you so much. Bye. Thanks a lot to all of you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.